All right, so just after we wrapped the taping of Counterpoints last night, Elon Musk went on a tear on Twitter.com, purging some of his most significant critics. He said at least half of them, he told the account Unusual Whales, or the account Unusual Whales reported at least half of them had violated his new policy related to that Elon Jets account that he doesn't like, which where he has now implemented a policy that says you cannot share the kind of real-time location of any person. Obviously, a policy that is well-intentioned, like we're not trying to inflict violence on anybody, but also is shot through with all sorts of kind of immediate objections to well, wait a minute, so you can't. Yeah, the number of things that people could come up with that you couldn't do as a result of that policy are kind of almost endless in a real-time app. Like that is Twitter's thing. That Twitter is like all about, like the real time. And so let's see, we have a list of some of them here. So not just Elon Jet, we got Jack Sweeney, who ran Elon Jet. The entire Mastodon account was taken down. I guess on the argument that Mastodon also allows people to share FAA, flight information. IGD News, I'm not sure what that is. Aaron Rupar, famous for his many clips of Fox News and Trump campaigns. So I'm not sure where anybody will get their Trump clips from now on. Then Donnie O'Sullivan from CNN, Drew Harwell from the Washington Post, Matt Binder from Mashable, Ryan Mack from the New York Times, Michael Lee from The Intercept, he's my colleague, and Keith Olbermann, former MSNBC host, have all been booted. It remains to be seen which of these will be permanent bans, which of these will be 7-day suspensions. Ken Klippenstein called it the night of the long hair plugs. It was quite a night.
I was like, this is the end of Scarface.
Yeah. I get cranky sometimes. And if I lost $50 billion in a week or two, or whatever amount of money he's seen his wealth decline at, I'd be pretty upset too. And when I get upset, I go on a blocking spree. Anybody who's like being a little extra annoying a day where I'm cranky is gonna catch a block. Like that's how I do my self-care. So I think this was like self-care on a mass scale from Elon, where instead of going on a blocking spree, he just went on a banning spree. Well, what did you think of the Elon's purge last night?
I have a slightly different take on this, which is not just kind of enjoying the Schadenfreude, but it's also that I think the priorities here are being exposed. And from my perspective, these are all folks, like I have a colleague who's been suspended for, saying, whether or not you agree with it, that Rachel Levine is a man. That's what got my colleague John Daniel Davidson suspended over, and he's been suspended for months. It wasn't reinstated by Elon. And there have been bans over other things over the years that, have just been wildly unfair. And none of these people, Taylor Lorenz, Donnie O'Sullivan, Aaron Rupar, had any interest in the question of free speech when Jack or Parag Agrawal were overseeing these problems. And so I have it's not just sort of amusing to watch people be upset now, but from my perspective, like, listen, Elon Musk is acting like an ideological billionaire. That's exactly what he's acting like. If you expected anything differently from Elon Musk, you had crazy blinders on. And I think his policy is silly. I understand where it's coming from, but he's acting exactly like a capricious, wealthy person does. Journalists are not supposed to act in the way that we're seeing journalists act now. Like, this should have been a long-standing complaint of journalists. They should have always been upset about the unfair bans and blocks and all of that stuff. But that old sort of ACLU mentality left the media years ago. And so now to just sort of watch the self-serious freak out last night, it was just like, come on, man, we're in this position exactly because people felt like there was a disparity in how they were being treated on Twitter. And so now we're all upset about it. Well, it's like, cry me a river. I think it's wrong. But I also think the reaction has been wrong for years.
Yeah, I might be one of the only remaining kind of journalists on the left who is still considered by most people to be on the left who has any standing on this question, because I was opposed to what they did over the Hunter Biden question. I was opposed to a bunch of the bans. I think the most odious speech that isn't directly calling for violence, I think is ought to be allowed, and that just because you think something is gross, odious, disgusting, politically wrong, etc. It's not a cause for censorship. It's not a cause for ban. So I've been saying that consistently, and one of the few people, because a lot of other people who I kind of came up with who have said the same things now get dubbed as right wing, and so. The idea
got called
that
a conservative
conservative by the
Washington
Washington Post.
Yeah.
Yes, which is just sort of like an epithet rather than an actual descriptor. So as somebody I think who still does have some standing, I would say that, and Aaron Rupar has constantly coming after me, and I have taken no shortage of grief from people like Rupar, for the positions that I've taken. I still think that it's absurd to ban Rupar. I also kind of like his videos, even sometimes they're out of context, but it's a useful service. They're helpful, useful service. But I just think it's wrong to take out your peak at your political opponents and bar them from what Elon refers to as the town square. I really do think it is basically a public utility, a town square type of place. I've never used the it's a private company, they should be able to do what they want argument before Elon, and I would not use that now, because I actually believe that all spaces across the world ought to be places that have democratic input over them from the people, from bottom up. So I hope that he feels a lot of pressure on this and reverses this and says look, he finds some face-saving way and just calls them 7-day suspensions or something. Because I also think, and I'm curious if you're actually, let's play Elon, right?
Yeah.
So last night he called into a Twitter Spaces where a bunch of these journalists were talking, and was asked a couple questions. Let's roll that if you can.
Yeah.
In the last few hours, with a handful of journalists being banned.
Well, as I'm sure everyone who's been doxxing would agree, showing real-time information about somebody's location is inappropriate, and I think everyone on this call would not like that to be done to them. And there is not going to be any distinction in the future between journalists, so-called journalists, and regular people. Everyone's going to be treated the same. You're not special because you're a journalist. You're a Twitter. You're a citizen. So no special treatment. You dox, you get suspended. End of story. So and ban evasion, or trying to be clever about it, I posted a link to the real-time information, is obviously that is obviously simply trying to evade the meaning. There's no different than actually showing real-time information.
So when you're saying posting a link to it, I mean, some of the people like Drew and Ryan Mack from the New York Times who were banned were they were reporting on it in the course of sort of pretty normal journalistic endeavors. You consider that a tricky attempt at ban evasion?
You show the link to the real-time information, ban evasion, obviously.
Drew, I don't think you were posting the real-time information, right?
I mean, you're suggesting that we're sharing your address, which is not true. And you're suggesting that we're posting. We never. I never posted your address.
You posted a link to the address.
We posted a link. In the course of reporting about Elon Jet, we posted links to Elon Jet, which are now not online and now banned on Twitter. And Twitter also, of course, marks even the Instagram and Mastodon accounts of Elon Jet as harmful. Using, we have to acknowledge, using the same exact link blocking technique that you have criticized as part of the Hunter Biden New York Post story in 2020. So what is different here and
it's
there.
No more acceptable for me. It's no more acceptable for me, for you, than it is for me. It's the same thing. So anyway.
So it's unacceptable what you're doing?
No, what you dox, you get suspended, end of story. That's it.
Elon, I have to ask, I mean, I think what everyone's wondering is it's highly unusual for journalists at the Washington Post and the New York Times to have their Twitter accounts suspended. And it just so happens that it's, the boss in charge, so, what's the deal there? Oh, I think Elon has left.
Yeah,
I guess
That's
we'll never
unfortunate
know
because,
the answer.
yeah,
Unless
I mean,
we can guess what the difference is there.
So
and then afterwards there were widespread reports that spaces went down. So this conversation did not really continue because it went down, and then they realized all spaces went down for a while. So it does appear like he flicked the switch after that and was like, done with spaces. Nobody's talking about me.
I mean, again, I think it's
spaces is back.
I think for somebody who, to your point, Ryan, does believe that this platform should be run sort of neutral in a neutral free speech type, with a neutral free speech type vision, this is hypocritical. I think it's not a great way to have journalism conducted in that space, especially since journalism is a huge part of the platform. I think the private jet information, which is already public, is entirely fair game. So I think it is hypocritical. I think it's ill-advised. I also think these journalists in the spaces acting like this is D-Day is kind of funny.
Somebody posted something like, my opinion of this is that it's bad and funny. Maybe we can say it's both, but I'd also add sad, maybe, like in the end, like if he does end up driving kind of journalists off of Twitter, I think a lot of the chuds who are kind of like celebrating that people like Rupar, who are their enemies, are leaving, are going to really regret. They're gonna be sad when they're gone. Like if they wanted a platform that was just an ecosystem of kind of right-wing people talking to each other about strategy or whatever, they have Parler, they have Gab, they have lots of different spaces where they can do that. But it's no fun because there's nobody to own, and there are also no journalists to do it in front of, which then doesn't allow you to kind of influence the narrative. And then what you actually see, and you spend more time on some of these sites than I do, but you actually see them then just devolving into internecine fights among themselves, right wingers against right wingers. That's what happens in left forums, where there are no kind of journalists, no mainstream media, no other politicians. It's mostly just like left wing grassroots people and activists, and there's nobody else to own. There's no right wingers to go after, so they just end up tearing each other apart. And so if that's what they want Twitter to turn into, that's what it'll become. Because and I made this point in my Substack last night, that like a lot of people don't, I think, understand. I think you do, but I think a lot of people don't get that journalists are actually as annoying as they are. And actually mainstream journalists, as extra annoying as they are the kind of thing, the beating heart that keeps Twitter going, because the mainstream journalists are on there, and because the mainstream journalists still are able to shape narratives, that brings all of the politicians onto the platform to then work those journalists over, work the refs. Then you have all of the activists and the advocates who also come on, because they're trying to work the journalists, they're trying to work the politicians at the same time. Then that brings the people in, because they want to participate in and also watch this entire show unfold. If you take the journalists away, you kind of just get Facebook. Journalists have all left Facebook. Politicians are still on there. They're posting their press releases. They have an intern who's in the comment section, liking all their constituent posts. They're harvesting emails and small dollar donations out of Facebook, but there's no life there. Like there's no story being created.
News outlets do still, not so much individual journalists, but news outlets still do rely on Facebook for a big chunk.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people. There's a lot of traffic, but news isn't made there. Stories are not created. Narratives aren't set. Like that happens now on Twitter. And I think if you ban too many journalists and journalists stop waking up in the morning and checking Twitter, the risk for Elon is that they might figure out that they don't actually have to wake up in the morning and check Twitter. Like there was a life before Twitter and there could be a life after Twitter. And I know that's your kind of like paradise, right?
I was going to say, it sounds too good. It is too good to be true. But you're right that, and it's not just news journalists, right? Like we're talking in the political context, but this is also huge in the entertainment media space. So celebrities have no reason to be on Twitter if the journalists aren't on Twitter, and kind of vice versa too. That's the Twitter ecosystem is for elite discourse, and it's very convenient for elites, and then it's convenient for sort of normal people who want to kind of help shape that dialogue too, that want to have
it's so democratizing in that way.
They want the option or the potential at least to know that the president of the United States is scrolling past their tweet because Donald Trump reportedly looked at his Twitter feed himself on his phone.
Right. Totally.
Right. Or a celebrity or a journalist, for instance, like neither of us is a celebrity. We read a lot of our mentions and like interact with people who are, talking about our work. And that's before Twitter, you really couldn't do that.
Yeah. And what I would say to a lot of the right-wing viewers would be like, don't you want to be able to yell at me? And also like liberal viewers who want to yell at me, or far left who want to yell at me from the far left. Like that's what you guys want. You want to be able to yell at people. So if you kind of push everybody off, it's just going to be y'all, and you're really going to miss us.
Yeah. And
if around, you're going to miss Aaron Rupar, believe it or not.
Here's what's interesting is Elon Musk saw, and I think he saw partially with Twitter that it was, this was in Barry Weiss's publication yesterday called The Free Press. He was talking about how in a conversation with her and some other journalists, like he thinks he paid twice what Twitter was worth at that like $44 billion mark. I think that's true. And he said it was basically being run like an activist organization. All they needed to do was break even every year. They didn't care if they were raking in a big profit because they were just trying to break even and function as this sort of utilitarian platform. And he was thinking, well, you can actually probably increase daily use because Twitter pales in comparison to other social networks in terms of the amount of daily users it actually has. You can increase daily use. You can get more ad money if you actually bring the spirit of like free speech, neutrality back to Twitter. And so it's interesting because this is also part of his business plan for Twitter, is to have a more neutral approach to speech moderation on the platform. And so kind of seeing the pendulum swing in a different direction as it relates to him is, again, like that's an interesting wrinkle in the business plan for Twitter.
Right. That undermines the neutrality of it, which is the whole point that he was trying to bring to it.
Which is what you were saying, in that like it's actually more interesting when you have this neutral approach to speech because you have open sharing of ideas.
Right. That's what I still love about Twitter is gives me access to all of these differing views that are outside of the kind of bubble that social media is trying to push people into. Twitter is one of the few that can push you out. You have to work a little bit because the algorithm will kind of put a right-wing person into a right-wing timeline and a left-wing person in a left-wing timeline, etc. But it's not that hard to break out of it if you work to like follow the right people and engage with the right people. There's a couple statements that have come out. I could read these and get your response to them if you want. So here's the so here is the Washington Post statement from the Washington Post about the suspension of Drew Harwell. It's from Sally Busby, the executive editor of the Washington Post. The suspension of Drew Harwell's Twitter account directly undermines Elon Musk's claim that he intends to run Twitter as a platform dedicated to free speech. Harwell was banished from Twitter without warning, process, or explanation following the publication of his accurate reporting about Musk. Our journalists should be reinstated immediately. Unquote. Let me see if I have one more for you.
Yeah, I just put the CNN one up.
Oh, the CNN one. Yeah. So the impulsive and unjustified suspension of a number of reporters, including CNN's Donnie O'Sullivan, is concerning, but not surprising. Twitter's increasing instability and volatility should be of incredible concern for everyone who uses the platform. We have asked Twitter for an explanation. We will reevaluate our relationship based on that response. So a threat from CNN that they could perhaps tell all of their journalists to get off of Twitter. Like, it seems like that's kind of the veiled threat that they're making there, which again, I know the initial impulse from haters of CNN would be good riddance. But then I would go back to my original point: be careful what you wish for. Like
yeah,
this,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And CNN's news website is a traffic juggernaut. It's like one of the top news
true.
websites in the world. So while people like to poke fun at CNN's terrible ratings on the cable side, they don't need Twitter at all for traffic. Like some independent media outlets really do get a good chunk of traffic from Twitter or from Facebook. CNN does not need Twitter. But I would turn this statement around where it says it's concerning but not surprising. It is exactly how I feel about the reaction from journalists. And again, like everyone should have the same low expectations of capricious billionaires. In fact, that rightful expectation is exactly why the Fourth Estate exists. It's exactly why the First Amendment is the First Amendment. And it's because you can't function. You can't have a Republican ecosystem, a democratic ecosystem, without a free press. And so this is concerning and not surprising from my perspective to see the same journalists who actually called for, Ben Collins. I mean, some of these people actually have actively advocated
like
for
campaigned
bans.
for, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for other journalists, just because they don't like the fact that those journalists are conservative and have different cultural perspectives than them, even though the majority of the country, in some cases, that they live in shares those positions on certain issues. So it's rich, but it's far more concerning to me that their standard for speech moderation is where it is. I have, like, of course, Elon Musk's is where it is, but for journalists to be in that place, I think is a bigger danger.
And when I was arguing with these journalists over the years, one of the points that I would make when I would lose on principle would be utilitarian and pragmatic, to say that, look, you're not always going to be in command of the censorship pen.
Yeah.
And in fact, the more kind of marginalized you are in society, and so this would be directed at, say, Antifa or advocates for Black Lives Matter or others who were kind of engaging in a lot of the deplatforming and censorship arguments, saying like, you're not hegemonic. Like, you recognize the society that you live in. You describe the society so effectively. Understand that you're trying to then empower that society with tools that, guess what, will be used against you. And so I didn't know exactly how those tools would be used against them. I couldn't have predicted a couple of years ago that a billionaire would buy Twitter and then ban a bunch of them. But that kind of thing is to be predicted in a society that goes like this. I saw somebody else make this point, but it does feel so much like the guy who finally who's been kind of annoying in a forum for years and complaining to the moderators constantly about how the thing is run, and then he finally, like, everybody finally leaves and he gets to be the moderator and just instantly bans all the people that he doesn't like that. Like, how many forums have been destroyed over the life of the internet through that precise cycle and that pattern? It's incredible to see it playing out on kind of a global macro scale, with basically he's become the moderator and he's just banning the people he doesn't like.
No, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what's happening. And the thing with Elon Musk is, when you look at that Spaces clip that we played, he's pretty self-aware, and that's kind of goes to the illustration that you just used, or the metaphor of, like, the moderator, is that, like, Elon Musk knows that he's Elon Musk. He knows that people are going to, he knows that journalists are coming from where they're coming from. He knows that people are going to freak out. He has a better understanding, I think, of the internet than certainly a lot of tech executives do. And like the internet culture than a lot of tech executives do, which is why I wonder if some element of this is that he just knows he's drawing tons of people to the platform. And I don't know if it's tons. I would doubt that it's tons, but if that's his ambition, to just sort of create chaos, and he can protect his family, and even though it might not be perfectly in line with the free speech vision he said he had, it'd get people on, because now guess what? Elon Musk himself is just popping into random Twitter spaces. And if you're on Twitter at the right time, maybe you'll see it. And maybe you'll be able to take part in it. And so maybe there's some like element of spectacle as a business measure that's being taken here. I don't know.
It feels more capricious and just kind of impulsive than that.
But
and
he might justify it by saying,
right, yes, I'm sure he could. He's smart
capriciousness
enough
is
he could
good
do
for
that.
business. Yeah.
But yeah, this goes back to, for people who haven't followed along, there's this account, Elon Jets, or used to be an account, Elon Jets, that would basically track Elon's jets. And that's not unique to him. Like the FAA publishes the different flight information, and there are some geeks who just like love. Jake Sherman actually like tweets about this all the time. Like he'll and breaks news that way, like saying, "Oh, look, this, a flight just left Columbus over to here," and he'll be able to like guess at some news coming out of that. They follow this thing very closely during Veep stakes, because like trying to figure out, is there a plane going from Wilmington over to where's it going? But anyway, so somebody then like harassed and scared his family as using this flight information. We don't know if it was Elon Jets though, because here's Elon's problem, is that anybody who's like that determined to like stalk Elon Musk at an airport knows how to get the FAA flight data. Like exactly. It's not a casual person who's just like scrolling through and sees Elon Jets and is like, oh yeah, why don't I go harass Elon Musk? I mean, maybe that's possible. Like you can imagine a scenario where that happens, but in general, somebody who wants that information can find it. And I asked Michael Lee, my colleague, what he got banned for, and he said he posted about somebody getting banned and said that it was related to the Elon Jets account, and said that the Elon Jets account had now migrated over to Mastodon. And he posted like not the link to the FAA thing, and not what was being posted, but said, this is the person's account over at Mastodon, who is the Elon Jets, because you've seen this all the time. Somebody gets banned and they say, hey, I'm going to whatever other platform, going to Mastodon. Here's my account over at Mastodon. So he posted that. And Elon's argument is that within that there are links. And the argument then could be, well, if you write an article about it and the article links to the account and the account links to the FAA site, then that could be it. If you say, what if you said Google FAA.gov and here's how to find it? Like, does that count? Because we're all living on the internet. Like it's the internet. Like it is
real life.
It's all interconnected. And so to try to like completely wall it out of there, I think he realizes is pretty untenable. But he's making a point here that he's not going to flinch from it. We'll see. I mean, I've seen a lot of people, a lot of his defenders try to say like, look, this is the policy and they violated the policy. What I would tell those folks is like, do what the principled free speech defenders of the past have done, which is to say, I don't agree with Aaron Rupar. And I think that he certainly brought it on himself by being such a jerk about censorship for other people. Yet I still support his speech rights. Like that's what principle means.
No, I agree with that. Although it doesn't mean that you have to shed any tears for the.
Nobody's asking anybody to shed tears. You're allowed to laugh, even,
because that I will not do.
Right? You can laugh and call it deeply wrong and troubling, and laugh at the same time.
That's a beautiful.
That's because that's all we have. That's all we have left, really.
That's actually a really beautiful poetic sentiment, I think, to wrap up on. You can laugh and cry all at once.
There you go.
All right. Well, we'll continue following the story, obviously, because I expect there'll probably be more unfolding in the days to come to see if Elon stands by this. I'm sure he will, but to see if it's sort of implemented in any other area. Because private jet tracking, as you said, Ryan, is sort of a hobby of Twitter geeks.
It is indeed. Be careful out there.
Be careful.